Every evening after her shift, a young nurse bought food for a homeless man near the hospital. But one night, he grabbed her by the wrist. "Child, you have fed me so many times. Let me repay you. Do not go home your usual way tonight. Go through downtown, take the long way around, and tomorrow morning I will tell you everything." Before we continue, please write in the comments which state you are from and how old you are. Enjoy the story. My name is Lena Vance, and for 6 years, Mercy General Hospital had been more home to me than my apartment ever was. I worked wherever they needed me. ER intake during the day, dressing rooms in the evening, graveyard shifts when the halls felt hollow, and every beep echoed too loudly. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't loud. I believed calm was a kind of medicine. If you stayed steady long enough, most storms passed. Kindness, to me, wasn't a virtue. It was maintenance, like washing your hands, like checking vitals twice. After every shift, I followed the same routine. I clocked out, pulled on my jacket, walked past the gates, but instead of heading straight to the bus stop, I always drifted toward the fence on the side lot. That's where he sat. On a low concrete ledge, just inside the glow of the streetlight, was a man most people never truly saw. Gray hair, neatly trimmed stubble, clothes worn but clean. He never called out, never begged, never made anyone uncomfortable. Sometimes he held a newspaper, sometimes just an empty paper cup. I brought him food almost every night. Tea when it was cold, soup when it rained, pastries when the kiosk was still open. I don't remember when I learned his name, Mr. Burdrick, but somehow I did. He always thanked me quietly, without speeches or pity, like gratitude was something to be handled carefully. That night, my shift ran late. 3 emergencies came in at once: a woman with dangerous blood pressure, a young man with a torn hand, an elderly grandfather who couldn't remember his own address. By the time everything was settled, it was past 10. Outside, the cold cut straight through my jacket. The pavement gleamed wet under the streetlights. I just wanted to go home, boil water, and sit in silence. Still, I stopped at the kiosk. 2 hand pies, tea, a few tangerines from my bag. Mr. Burdrick was there, as always. He took the food, nodded, thanked me. Then he touched my wrist. Not hard, not threatening, just enough to stop me from walking away. And then he said it. His voice wasn't dramatic. That's what frightened me. It was calm, certain, like someone stating the weather. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. People walked by, cars passed. The hospital doors opened and closed behind me. Everything looked normal, and yet nothing felt right. "What do you mean?" I asked. He let go, but didn't look away. "Don't ask now. Just listen." I should have laughed it off, should have smiled politely, and gone home the same way I always did. But something in his eyes told me he wasn't guessing, so I did something small that changed everything. I took the long way home. I didn't know it yet, but someone noticed the moment I changed my route, and that decision would follow me all the way to my front door. I didn't feel brave when I chose the longer route. I felt watched. The bus stop lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make shadows jump. I stood closer to the curb than usual, clutching my bag, replaying the man's words in my head, not as a warning anymore, but as a countdown. Don't go home your usual way. The sentence had weight now, consequence. I told myself I was overreacting, that exhaustion had made my nerves jumpy. Hospitals do that to you. You see enough pain, enough chaos, and your brain starts inventing threats where there are none. That's what I told myself. Then I heard my name. "Lena?" I turned and saw Kendricks, my neighbor from the floor below mine. Varsity jacket, easy smile, the kind of guy who held doors open and remembered people's names just well enough to feel trustworthy. "Long shift?" he asked, stepping closer. "Yeah," I said. "You?" He shrugged. "Same old." We stood there together, the night stretching thin between us. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way his eyes kept darting past me. The way he angled his body slightly, like he was blocking something behind him. He glanced at the bag in my hand. "Dinner?" "For home," I said. "Didn't peg you as someone who actually cooks." He laughed lightly, then leaned in a bit. "Listen, it's late. I can walk you back." The words were ordinary, polite, helpful, But after the warning to by the fence, they sounded wrong, like lines spoken too early in a scene. "I'm taking a different route tonight," I said. "Through downtown." His smile hesitated. "Downtown?" he repeated. "That's out of the way. I need to stop somewhere." For just a second, something crossed his face. Disappointment? Surprise? It vanished quickly, replaced by that familiar grin. "Well," he said, "suit yourself." The bus arrived. I sat near the driver. Kendrick stood instead of sitting, his reflection hovering in the window beside me. When the bus slowed at the transfer point, I stood. So did he. My heart ticked faster. "You getting off here?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Yeah," he said. "Thought I'd stretch my legs." The night air felt colder when we stepped off. He walked behind me, close enough that I could hear his breathing. "Are you sure you don't want company?" he asked again. "Neighborhood's been weird lately." "I'm fine," I said, sharper than I meant to. "I'm in a hurry. I didn't look back when I crossed the street to the other stop. I didn't run, but my body moved faster on its own. When I finally reached my building, the lobby was empty. Silent. My reflection stared back at me from the glass door, eyes wide, face pale. I locked the door behind me, twice. Inside my apartment, the quiet felt too big. I set my bag down, took off my boots, listened. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Are you home?" My stomach dropped. I didn't reply, deleted it. Immediately regretted deleting it. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. "Kendricks. Everything okay? Where did you disappear to?" I stared at the screen, my pulse loud in my ears. Why would he care where I went? Why would he need to know? I placed the phone face down and turned the lights off. Sleep didn't come. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. By morning, I would learn that the warning hadn't been about danger on the street. It had been about someone who already knew where I lived. Morning came without rest. I woke with my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt, my body heavy like I'd been carrying something all night instead of sleeping. The messages were still there when I turned my phone over, one from a number with no name, one from Kendrick's. I didn't open them again. I already knew what they said. Questions dressed up as concern, curiosity pretending to be care. I took the bus to work instead of walking. Not because I was afraid, at least, that's what I told myself, but because the street near the hospital felt too exposed in daylight, like something that had been safe yesterday no longer was. The hospital buzzed the way it always did in the morning. Stretchers rolling, phones ringing, voices overlapping. I slipped back into my routine easily, washing hands, checking charts, smiling at patients, because routine is a shield. If you move like everything is normal, sometimes fear waits its turn. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the fence. By the end of my shift, I was watching the clock. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp and bright, nothing like the heavy night before. And there he was. Mr. Burdrick sat in his usual spot, hands folded, as if he hadn't moved since I'd last seen him. When he noticed me, he stood immediately. "You came," he said, like he'd been expecting nothing else. "You told me to," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You said you'd explain." He nodded slowly. "I will." We stood near the fence while people passed behind us. I waited, my fingers curling around my bag strap, bracing myself for something dramatic. Instead, he spoke quietly. "Last night, before you came," he said, "two men were standing here, one on the phone, one pacing, talking like they didn't care who heard." My chest tightened. "They talked about a nurse," he continued, "about how she leaves late, walks alone, takes the same path every night." I swallowed. "How did you know it was me?" "Because I watch," he said simply. "And because they mentioned your building." There is a moment when fear stops being abstract and becomes practical. For me, it happened when I realized that if I didn't speak now, I would spend the rest of my life measuring footsteps behind me and calling it being careful. I had seen patients live that way, shrinking their worlds inch by inch, until safety became another kind of prison. I wasn't ready to live like that. The hospital felt different after my conversation by the fence. The same corridors, the same beeping monitors, but now every reflective surface showed me a version of myself who was listening harder, watching longer. I noticed how often people assumed hospitals were safe simply because help was nearby. Help only works when you ask for it. I waited until lunchtime, when the ER calmed just enough to breathe. A police officer stood near the desk, filling out paperwork for a patient who had come in with a split eyebrow. Detective Cordell. I recognized him from previous cases, quiet, observant, the kind of man who didn't interrupt unless something mattered. I walked over before my courage could change its mind. "Excuse me," I said. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" He looked up, tired but attentive. "Of course." We stepped aside. I told him everything about the man by the fence, about the warning, about Kendricks, the messages, the way my route change seemed to have been noticed. I didn't embellish, I didn't dramatize. I listed facts the way I would symptoms. Cordell listened without reacting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Did you save the messages?" he asked. "Yes. One was deleted, but the other's there." "Good. We'll document this. Not because a crime's happened yet, but because patterns matter." That word stuck with me. Patterns. He asked about cameras, my building, the lobby, nearby stores. He told me not to confront Kendricks, not even politely. Neutral responses only, distance, visibility. And tonight, he added, "You won't be walking alone." For the first time in days, I felt something like relief. That evening, security walked me to the bus stop. I hated how grateful I felt for it, hated that this was necessary, but I accepted it anyway. Near my building, I saw Kendricks by the entrance. He smiled when he saw me, stepped closer. "Hey," he said. "Why weren't you replying last night? I was worried." The guard stopped beside me, pretending to adjust his radio. Kendricks noticed. His smile shrank. "Everything's fine," I said calmly. Phone was on silent. He studied me, searching for something. "Why'd you go through downtown?" "Just turned out that way," I said. "Good night." I went inside without looking back. 2 days passed, no messages, just smiles that lingered too long, questions that meant nothing. Until the envelope appeared. Inside was a photograph of me leaving the hospital. On the back, "Don't get smart." I didn't hesitate. I called Cordell. By the time he arrived, we both knew this had crossed from suspicion into something. I sat on the edge of my couch while Cordell spoke, nodding when my body remembered how, even as my mind lagged behind his words. They were watching for patterns, he said. Your schedule, the nights you worked late, the days you visited your sister, the routes you took without thinking. I pictured my life laid out like a map someone else had drawn, every habit highlighted. Be stated. Every kindness all circled in red. He planned to wait until you were gone overnight, Cordell continued. Your apartment was ideal, first floor, courtyard-facing windows, minimal witnesses. And then? I asked, though my throat tightened around the words. Cordell paused. He didn't need to finish. I was grateful for that. When the officers left, the apartment felt unfamiliar, like a place that had nearly stopped being mine. I locked the door, checked it twice, then a third time. Only when my hands stopped shaking did I sit down. I thought of the fence, of the man who had seen what I hadn't, of the warning I almost ignored. The next morning, I went there. Mr. Berderick was sitting in his usual spot, hands folded, gaze steady. When he saw me, he stood. "Well?" he asked. "Alive?" I nodded. "Because of you." He waved it off, uncomfortable with gratitude. "I just said what I had to." "You put yourself at risk," I said. If he'd realized when a man sees trouble and pretends not to see it, he interrupted softly. He lives worse afterward than the one who lived through it. I've done that before. I don't anymore. The words settled into me like a promise. I brought him soup the next day. And the next. Life didn't snap back into place, it shifted. I noticed things now. Questions that weren't really questions. Smiles that wanted something. Cordell later told me Kendricks would be charged. Others had come forward. Apartments, missing things, patterns. There was one detail I kept circling back to, no matter how much time passed. That first night. Not the messages, not the photograph, not even the sound at my door. It was the moment before all of it. The moment when I almost walked straight past the fence. When routine nearly won over instinct. I realized I had never really let myself sit with that. So one evening, after my shift ended early, I didn't rush home. I didn't distract myself. I went back to the fence and stood exactly where I had stood that night, the air cool against my skin, the hospital lights humming behind me. Mr. Burderick wasn't there yet. For the first time, I saw the spot through different eyes. From here, you could see the bus stop clearly, the street corner, the entrance to my building in the distance. It was a perfect place to observe without being noticed. That's when it hit me. The warning hadn't been random timing. It had been precise. When Mr. Burderick arrived, I asked him something I hadn't asked before. How long had you been watching them? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, long enough to be sure. How did you know I'd listen? I asked. He looked at me gently. Because you stop when others don't. The simplicity of the answer unraveled me. I had spent weeks analyzing danger, threat, intention. But safety had come from something quieter. Someone paying attention, and someone willing to interrupt routine. As we talked, people passed by. Nurses, visitors, strangers wrapped in their own worlds. I wondered how many near misses happened every day without anyone ever knowing. On my way home, I didn't feel watched. I felt present. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. And in that sleep, I finally understood why that warning had been meant for me and why I couldn't ignore what came next. The dream didn't come like a nightmare. There were no shadows, no doors, no sudden jolts awake. Instead, it unfolded slowly, like memory rearranging itself with permission. I was standing in my kitchen again, the light off, the world held in that fragile stillness right before something breaks. But this time, I wasn't frozen. I was aware. When I woke, my chest felt lighter. Not because fear was gone, but because understanding had finally arrived. That night at the beginning of all this, the one I keep returning to, I hadn't escaped danger by chance. I had stepped out of it because two people, unknown to each other, had been watching patterns from opposite sides. One for harm, one for protection. Mr. Burderick had noticed what Kendricks assumed no one would see. A man everyone overlooked had become the only witness who mattered. That realization changed something fundamental in me. I went through my days differently now. Not guarded, not hardened, just honest. I spoke up when something felt off. I asked questions instead of swallowing discomfort. I trusted my instincts the way I trusted my training. Cordell called later that week. The case was moving toward resolution. Charges solid. Evidence undeniable. You did well, he said. Most people freeze. You acted. I thought about that. About how close I had been to doing nothing. That evening, I brought soup to the fence again. Mr. Burderick accepted it quietly, the steam rising between us like a shared secret. Do you ever regret it? I asked. Getting involved? He shook his head. Regret is for people who look away. I walked home under the streetlights feeling something close to peace. The city hadn't changed. But I had. And just when I thought the story was complete, one final truth waited to be spoken, one that would stay with me forever. The final truth didn't arrive with drama. It came quietly, the way real lessons always do, slipping into ordinary moments, refusing to be ignored. Weeks after everything settled, I found myself standing at the nurse's station, watching a new hire hesitate before speaking up about a patient she felt uneasy around. I saw it immediately, that pause, that instinct she was about to override. Say it, I told her gently. If something feels off, it matters. She did. And she was right. Later, as we walked together to the parking lot, she thanked me. I almost told her it was nothing, almost dismissed it the way I used to. Instead, I said, someone once told me to listen to myself. It saved me. At the fence, Mr. Burderick's spot was empty that evening. A folded note sat where he usually did. Inside was a simple message, written carefully. Saw what I needed to see. Time to move on. I didn't feel sad. I felt proud. Some people enter your life only long enough to change its direction. I keep walking home aware now. Not fearful, not naive, just present. I hold kindness with intention. I offer help without disappearing inside it. I understand that safety isn't silence, and bravery isn't loud. It's choosing not to look away. Every time I pass that fence, I remember the night routine almost cost me everything, and how paying attention gave it all back. And if there's one thing I carry forward, it's this. Listen, speak, trust yourself, because sometimes the quiet warning you nearly ignore is the one that saves your life. Did you enjoy this story? Let me know in the comments, and tell me which city you're listening from. Your support truly means the world to me. On your screen right now, you'll see two powerful life stories I highly recommend watching next. There's so much more waiting for you on this channel, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story touched you. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next life story.